Hi everyone, my name is Catie Heil. I'm over here on the page. I'm the digital curation librarian at the college, and I'm excited to be here with you, even if it's virtually. My title means that I manage a team that builds and maintains all of our digital collections. So we digitize them, especially those special items and special collections, and make themed digital collections out of them. Exactly the kind of thing that I'm going to be sharing with you today, actually. So people around the world then use those collections for research. My own background is in WIGS, actually. I have a BA in feminist philosophy and a master's degree in women's history, and then another master's degree in library and information science. So digital archives sit right at the center of my academic interests. So a couple of things to know about digital archives before we get started and before I kind of go through this LibGuide with you all. You may know that the publishing industry in academia is really pretty problematic. It's a system that's set up to profit the major publishers, and they really form a kind of monopoly and charge libraries around the country exorbitant prices because they know that they can. This then leads to a really disproportionate information landscape, where underfunded institutions have had a hard time getting academic articles to their students, even as professors at those very institutions have to try to continue to publish in those prestigious journals just to get tenure. So there's some evidence that women and people of color are also less likely to publish in some of the most prestigious journals, which is highly problematic given how important that is for good jobs and good security in academia. For example, a 2018 University of Washington study found that the first authors in the journal Nature, which is one of the highest profile scientific journals, only about 25% of those first authors were women. Digital archives and the open access movement have functioned as a kind of response to that capitalist information system. On top of the largely free access to information that digital archives provide, they also present primary sources, which allow feminist scholars, such as yourselves, to build your own arguments around them. That's not to say that these archives are presented without bias, of course. They hold the bias of the humans who created them, as all information sources do. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind as you look through the archives for your research. Archives are not neutral spaces, they're political spaces, and what's included in them and what's left out of them are statements about what mattered to the creators and or the funders. And they are intentionally curated. So as you're working in the archives, I'd like you to take note of who funds them. Some of the archives on our list are tiny community-based archives that are made with donated labor and sometimes donated technology and donated materials. Just because an archive is small or niche doesn't make it less valuable or less relevant. Finally, I'm going to talk just a little bit about using archives for your research. So each archive is constructed differently, but ultimately it's the metadata that enables search functionality on the website. So I'll go here and show you an example of metadata, for example. Let's look here. And let's look. So you can see this collection has metadata. It's description, dates that are relevant to the collection, tells you where it's located in the physical library, and a bunch of different topics that are relevant to it, notes. The type of information that you'll find here is text information, it's not photographs. So that's all metadata, and that's the kind of thing that helps you locate things that are important to you in these different digital collections. But because each archive is constructed differently, and because it's the metadata that enables the search functionality on the site, that means that the more effort the creators spent describing each item, and the more consistent they were with their descriptions, the more likely it is that you'll be able to easily find things as a researcher. So archives created by activists and not trained librarians might be a little bit tougher to navigate, but they often contain really invaluable research materials. So stick with it and don't hesitate to ask me if you're having trouble finding something. I'd say the hardest part is actually locating the digital archives themselves um, among the heaps of information out there. So I've tried to help with that. I didn't know your specific research topics, so I couldn't curate my searching around them. That said, the archives in this LibGuide should cover a fairly broad range of topics. Um, if you'd like assistance finding archives related to special topics that are not included here, though, please do contact me. Here's my contact information again. My email address is cheil@worcester.edu, and my office is in Digital Collections on lower 1 of Andrews Library. And here's my phone number. It's 330-263-2225. Email's probably the quickest way to contact me, so don't hesitate to email. Let's take a look at a couple of archives that are on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of who created them and who financed them and how they're likely to function because of those two things. So let's go in here and let's take a look at the People of Color Zine Project, for example. So this is a tiny, tiny archive. It includes 29 different publications. And if you're on this page, if you found this page, you might be tempted as a user to kind of go up here and try and search in the search bar for your topic, and hoping that one of these zines will come up in response to your topic, whatever one is most relevant. This is actually a much larger website, and so you'll notice it says Find Creators and Content here. It's going to search outside of just the POC Zine project. And in fact, there is no real way to search this archive. You have to browse it, which is okay because there are only 29 items, right? So you may need to spend more time. So let's look at this one, for example. So you'll see if you're looking for information here about this item, you have a description here, which is a really helpful description, but you don't have any additional information. So you don't have any keywords or really anything about the authors or the date when it was published. You see published on December 23rd, 2019. It's not really clear whether that's the date of the publication of this item. It looks like it probably is, or whether that's the date when it was actually added to the website. So, but if you look through here, you can kind of gather some of that information yourself if you need it. And you can get a sense of what's useful about this particular item. So you might have to actually go in, like zoom in and read the material itself, rather than kind of just searching in a search bar and hoping that whatever it is that's important to you comes up. Okay. So this is an example of a largely underfunded archive. If we go back here, and if you read this, they're actually asking for people to help fund this archive and talking about the purpose of the archive. They have a Twitter page where they're trying to spark interest and kind of build a user community, but they don't have, they're not funded by some gigantic library or some larger institution or granting agency that might provide for a lot of digitization money, metadata creation money, etc. So it's just helpful to be aware of that as a researcher, to think about who's creating this archive, how it's funded, and what that has to do with how you use it. Okay, so that's one archive. Let's look at something kind of on the other end of the spectrum. So if we go to the Schomburg, this is, and if you see here in the LibGuide, I've given you a description of each one of these archives. The Schomburg was founded in 1925. It's an incredibly famous resource for research in Black culture. And it's located in Harlem in New York, and it has just a ton of really valuable historical items, 11 million items. So let's go in here and look what we can find. So this is the digital Schomburg. You can see that they've divided things into types of projects. So you've got podcasts from visiting scholars, oral histories, digital projects, which if you read this, it sounds like they're digital exhibits, which might be of interest. But then you also have these digital library collections. So this is where we're going to go. We're going to go over here to Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Division. And even here you have a sense that this is a really large collection. Just from immediately clicking on it, you see all these different things that you can look through here. And then if you start to scroll down, you'll notice that some of these collections that are listed themselves have almost 2,000 items in them. And there are a lot of those collections, right? So enormous, enormous. The difference is that because of the way this is curated, but because they have a lot of people creating good metadata, it's actually, despite how gigantic the collection is, it's easier in many ways than in that last collection to find what it is that you're looking for. So let's look for something. Let's look for Underground Railroad and see what we can find. Okay, so you'll notice that you do a search. It says there are 141 search results for Underground Railroad. You see a collection of images, but then you also see some text here. Let's click on one of these. Let's look at this. It might be a little bit challenging to read this. It's from 1898, it looks like. You'll notice as soon as you scroll down that you have quite a lot of options here. You can download this item. It says it's free to use without restriction. So if you wanted to use that in your paper or in your own work, you could. You can see that it's part of a collection called The Underground Railroad from Slavery to Freedom. So you could click on this and actually go and see this collection if you wanted to. And then you have a ton of information about this item as you scroll down. So you can see where it came from. You can see where it's physically located in the library, topics, and you can click on these topics to see other items on these topics, all kinds of things that are really useful. So just know that depending on where you're searching, you might have really different experiences, and that's okay. And if you have trouble, again, the best thing to do is to look through a pretty broad number of archives on your topic. Again, this is a really selected list of archives. This is not all of the digital archives that are out there at all. But there are a good number of archives here, and some of these are gigantic archives. So I'm hopeful that at least some of these will be useful to you. But really, they're meant to be examples. So if there's nothing here that's relevant to your topic, again, please reach out to me. My email address is, again, cheil, H-E-I-L, @worcester.edu. So don't hesitate to reach out. We can sit down together virtually, and I'm happy to walk you through what I would do to find information on your topic, and we can look a little bit more closely at some of the archives that are relevant to your work. Okay, thank you so much for your attention, and don't hesitate to contact me. Bye.